Hey guys, thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Chris and I just got done watching Happy Death Day to You. And if you're here, you've most likely just got done watching the movie as well. If you have not, please click away. This will be completely spoiler filled. I will be going into the ending of the movie, explaining its hidden meaning, possible details that you might have missed. If you want to check out my spoiler-free thoughts, I'll link it in the description or card right above me. But with that stuff out of the way, let's dive right into the ending for Happy Death Day to You. So with a sequel for Happy Death Day, it takes a very different approach with telling its story. So different, in fact, that it switches genres. The first movie is argued to be a horror comedy. Well, with this one, it becomes a sci-fi comedy. The movie begins with Carter's roommate sleeping in his car. We then follow him on his morning, what looks like the setup for a time loop day. Weird coincidental events that you know are non-forgettable, so if they were to happen to you again, you'd be like, feel like I'm living the same day. Like Tree had with someone wanting to sign her papers, the sprinklers, car alarm, that type of stuff. We find out this is picking up exactly where the first movie ended, with Carter and Tree getting together. However, we get to follow Ryan on his journey, and it turns out kid's a pretty smart dude. We are told that him and his lab partners, who are new characters to this story, invented a device called Sisyphus Quantum Generator, or Sissy for short. The reason they've been working on this is to test the theory if they are able to slow down molecules, in essence, slow down time. This device right here is the exact reason Tree was stuck in a time loop in the first movie. It's hinted at because she died at the exact time this generator was started. She was able to do this time loop. However, Ryan and his lab partners do get bad news that this device is just causing too much havoc with the electrical system of the college. So much so that the dean tells him to shut it down and get rid of it, putting him in a sad mood. It's here where the horror elements start to pick up in this movie. You get some creepy text of someone watching Ryan from afar, leading him to dark areas, a dark place in the lab, where eventually he'll encounter Babyface. Of course, he dies and the loop is repeated. This happens a few times until he finally mentions it to Tree what is happening to him, and she obviously knows what is happening to him. Setting up a trap to catch this Babyface killer and be done with it quickly, they discover that the killer was an alternate reality version of Ryan. Apparently when Sissy was turned on, God, that would be horrible taken out of context. FBI knocking on my door any second now. But back to the movie, other than Tree being stuck in her time loop, the device also kicked a version of Ryan from a different dimension into their reality. This Ryan believed that if he was able to kill himself in this time, it would close the loop and thus he'd be able to return to his dimension. That's how he explains it, but as we see, killing himself only starts the time loop, so his theory is inaccurate. Original Ryan is confused, frustrated, and angered by this and just decides to turn on the device one last time to test what would happen. And then this is what leads us to the overall rest of the premise of this movie, because Tree is then sucked back in to the beginning of the first movie, but in a different dimension. So what this means is it's essentially the same movie, which is kind of clever and meta with what sequels do, because a lot of times sequels just make the same movie with slight twisted elements. Take The Hangover Part 2. Again, the crew gets drunk and hung over, but they're in Thailand. Home Alone 2, a boy is lost again, except, oh, in New York. The movie at one point even compares itself to Back to the Future 2, which, yeah, kind of does the exact same thing, because that movie starts off with a repeating formula of traveling in time to see another family relative and save them, but then partway through the movie it switches its course to something completely different. Also, fun little Easter egg, since this is a second dimension, you get to see the number 2 all throughout the movie, on the cop on his collar, through gas tank cans. They're in the second floor of the hospital using the second elevator. A lot of small details like that where the number 2 is just hidden throughout that makes it kind of fun to watch the movie. Like, hey, I see what you're doing there. I think you get the idea. So basically the twist and turns in this movie is that she does live the same day. So she retains the knowledge of everything she went through in the first movie. But she quickly finds out that there are a lot of differences in this dimension that are not the same from her previous one. To list off a few, 1, Lori is not the killer in this dimension. In fact, they are just about acquaintances, not even best friends. Her best friend in this movie is a character by the name of Danielle, who is actually kind of her frenemy in her original dimension. Carter is also not single this time around. He is actually dating Danielle, Tree's best friend in this second universe. But the biggest difference is that in this universe, Tree's mother is alive and didn't die when she was younger. This really adds a great emotional element to the movie, because as much as Tree wants to get back to her dimension and go back to the way things were with dating Carter, she does get second thoughts and think, okay, I don't get the boyfriend, but I get to keep my mom, and that is something special. The whole time she's trying to decide whether to stay in this dimension or go back, she gets in contact with the Ryan of that dimension, being that that's the smartest person she knows, who created Sissy. Explains her situation, and he tells her that there is a way to get you back, we just need to get the right algorithm, an equation put into the machine that'll get you sent back to your time. This is then how the film incorporates those many deaths into the movie. Tree has to constantly kill herself until they get the perfect algorithm that sends her back to her dimension. And I want you to please keep in mind, while all of this is going on, her trying to decide to be with Carter or her mother, find the algorithm, commit suicide a bunch of different ways, 10% of the movie revolves around this babyface killer showing up every now and then. One of the reasons could be because in this dimension, technically Tree is not the main character of the story from the first movie. In this dimension, the main character is Laurie. She is still having an affair with the professor, which is what caused the conflict between Tree and Laurie in the first movie, but in this dimension, Tree did not have an affair with the professor, so it caused no conflict between them. In fact, Tree is never in any danger of being killed by this killer. If she were just to sit in the cafeteria all day and let time go by, nothing would happen to her because no killer is after her. The killer's sole purpose is to go after Laurie, because it is revealed that the killer of this movie, or killers, is the professor and his wife. And this is actually kind of clever because the alternate ending for the original Happy Death Day was to have the wife of the professor be the killer towards the end. Laurie was still the killer in a shape or form in that movie, but it was gonna end with Tree in the hospital, being healed up from her wounds, and then being drugged by a nurse who is revealed to be the wife of the professor. So just like that's an alternate ending for the first movie, it's the actual ending for this second movie. Tree does ultimately decide to go back to her timeline just because she realizes she does not belong here. The memories that this dimension of herself had do not fit with her. So she says goodbye to her mother, she says goodbye to Carter, and she rescues Laurie because she wants this dimension left clean. The gang finally getting the correct algorithm, bringing her back to her timeline where she is happy all over again. But we do have an end credits scene that sets up the threequel. The gang is performing community service because they did not listen to the dean and turn off that machine. In doing the community service, they are then contacted by agents of DARPA. DARPA stands for Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. They get the group together and tell them that we have taken Sissy, we want to do research on the device, and we need your help. It's here where Tree then decides to volunteer her frenemy Danielle for these experiments, and the movie ends with Danielle screaming, presumably being stuck in a time loop. My real quick thoughts on all this in the Happy Death Day to You series so far is I like how fun and entertaining they are. But even with that said, they are still continuing their marketing of false advertising. Even now, if you look at certain trailers or certain TV spots, they highlight very scary, frightening. And obviously if you look at all the trailers, it looks like a horror movie, and it's not. And I bet you the third movie will continue to market this series as a horror franchise when it's really not anymore. And I have no problem with it deciding to switch genres. That's actually kind of cool and not really been done before. But it does set my expectation that you're gonna focus on Babyface the Killer. You're gonna make it a slasher film. You're gonna really make that reveal of who the killer is a big deal, when in this movie it didn't matter at all. Especially since this dimension isn't really Trees, we could care less of it by the end of the movie. And then with that end credit scene, it makes you believe that Danielle is gonna be the main character of the third movie, which she's really not. It's all gonna come back to Tree because she's a great actress, Jessica Roth. She needs to continue being the protagonist for this series. But my biggest issue with that end credit scene is it was very specific in this movie that only Tree can retain the memory from these test subjects. So what do you mean we're trying to perform experiences every time you turn on the machine, only one person will remember it and everybody else will be left going, did we turn it on? Did we do it? What's going on? Not to mention that, but just the beginning of having 2 Ryans, and then that was thrown away very early into the movie with a small explanation. Okay. And the fact that she didn't even try to see what would happen if she continued living on past that day in the second dimension, because like I said, she's never really in any danger to be killed. It's Laurie in that dimension who's in danger to be killed. So what would happen if she ran out the clock? Which then she'd be permanently stuck in that universe, which in the end, which is something she wanted, at one point. And I know a lot of you will say, well, Chris, you're just overthinking this. These movies are meant to be fun and silly. And yeah, I guess you're right, but I feel like they could put a little more thought into them. Still excited to see what they'll do with the next one, what genre thing they will twist next. I'll give it one more movie, but my interest in this franchise is just slowly declining. Anyways, guys, those are just my thoughts and my ending explained for Happy Death Day to you. Let me know what you thought about the movie if you got around to see it. Are you happy with these twists and turns? Are you satisfied with its switching genres? Anything and everything, please let me know down below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at 3C Film Review. As always, I'm Chris. Take care.